in today's divided world, is it really possible to have actual conversations and debates, disagreements even, with the people in our lives? Well, my guest today seems to think so. If I wasn't so offended by his clearly terrible assertion that civil discourse is possible, I might actually agree with him. But just the fact that he has an opinion is incredibly offensive to us. So Anthony and I are ready to do battle today on the Unframe of Mind Show.
You're listening to the Unframe of Mind Show, the place to have the most mind-stretching, unprotected, intellectual intercourse of your life. Your host, Daniel Wagner, battles the forces of evil by lobbing fiery balls of truth, reason, and evidence over safe room walls.
Welcome to the Unframe of Mind Show.
You do better live than
I know,
you do recording.
I really do. It just rolls smooth live. Anyway, so welcome back to another episode of the Unframe of Mind Show, where we have uncomfortable conversations without a condom. I'm your host, Daniel Wagner.
And I'm your co-host, Anthony Truax.
And today we're having a guest on by the name of Cory Truax. Cory Truax is a self-proclaimed Christian conservative and the host of the impressively creative and original title Cory Truax Show. His show covers many similar topics to our own, such as culture, theology, politics, and philosophy. He also covers sports, but we won't hold that against him. Now, he pitched the idea of discussing the nature of conversation, debate, and discourse in today's divided world, and how it's still possible for people to disagree on subjects without tearing each other a new one. This is a subject that is near and dear to my heart, and perhaps we can model this phenomena for you on tonight's show of the Unframe of Mind Show. Welcome, Cory, to the show.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Good God, I don't think I could have made a more awkward introduction if I'd have tried. All right, so welcome to the show, Cory.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so for the viewing audience who gets to enjoy the shortened version of this, it's never a good show unless we start out with a whole bunch of technical difficulties to start the day out with. But we're here, we've made it, we're all still alive. Nobody's broke a sweat yet, so I think we're okay. So, Cory, I introduced you a little bit. Maybe you can tell the folks a little bit about yourself and the show so that we can get to know you a bit.
Sure. So I work a day job in higher education. That's where I make my living. But as many of us who are in podcasting do this podcasting thing on the side. That is, for me, locally here in Greenville, South Carolina on WLFJ. I have a show that's carried there on Saturday mornings, which, of course, is the prime time of radio. You want to be Saturday morning at 8 a.m.
Right.
But then I also have the podcast distributed lots of different places called the Cory Truax Show. I came up as a really rigid, right-wing conservative Christian who sort of hated everybody, because that's what we do in the right-wing conservative Christian world. We tend to be really cantankerous. As I got older, it started to occur to me, this isn't effective. This isn't helpful. And I started trying to think a little deeper. So to your topic there, Eleanor Roosevelt has one of my favorite quotes. She says that small minds talk about current events, medium minds talk about people, but the big minds talk about ideas. And I realized I've been spending my whole commentary life talking about people and events. It was very small-minded and medium-minded. So recently trying to talk more about ideas.
Right. More of
that concept. I like that a lot.
Yeah, a lot more of the long-term approach, and I think that's what we try to do a lot. We talk about the politics, but we also try to bring in those bigger ideas and how the politics actually affect those ideas and how we can apply different concepts and different ideas. So I definitely agree with you in terms of that direction. But I still just have to disagree with you just because, we just can't have conversations. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been on Twitter today and there's nobody on there having conversations.
No.
Yeah, on Twitter is the worst of them all. Maybe YouTube comment sections. It's either YouTube comment sections or Twitter is where adult thought goes to die.
Right.
It does. It is pretty brutal out there. I mean, if you don't want your feelings hurt, don't get on there, so...
Yeah, I'm essentially impossible to offend, so I can live in those worlds and not get offended. But what I find is there's something deep in the American mind now. Jonathan Haidt has written about this, that when someone says something contrary to what you think, people take it personally, like violence against them. Where that used to just be the reaction, I think, for a lot of folks in the Western world was, oh, that's interesting. Oh, you think something different? Well, let's just talk about that. But now it is taken immediately to mean you're a terrible person or you're saying I'm a terrible person because we disagree.
Anyway, yeah. There's definitely something going on with the advent of social media introduced into our world, where it used to be, a couple decades ago, you would just sit around with your buddies and just gripe about the weather, gripe about politics or whatever was on the news of the night, and then that was it. Nobody ever heard from you again until the next weekend when you're out at the bar again with your friends. And now with social media, you got like a permanent record of all your terrible thoughts, your good ideas, your battles, your victories. Everything is like been documented for you now. and yep. I just wonder if there, maybe we're starting to see like we're in the infancy of that, and maybe in the future we kind of have this growth. maybe we'll find some way to figure this out and figure out a better way. Do you foresee anything like that?
Oh, yeah, I want to be optimistic. My nature is to want to find a time that we can not hate each other for the smallest of disagreements. But I do think it's going to be generational. There is I think a majority of my age group, I'm 32, I think folks around my age and younger, I think we're a little better at it. I think the generation behind me, Gen X and then the baby boomers, for all of their complaints about snowflakes, they tend to be the ones that if you don't stand up for their special song before the NFL games, if you don't respect the things they want you to respect, they are really offended by it. And they act like the snowflake that they accuse others of being. Certainly there is the generation behind me, the Gen Z, that seem very sensitive. But there is, I think, a majority of us as time goes by and as we become the prominent voice in the discourse, that it can chill out and become more rational.
So you similar to me, we grew up at the time when they're right there at that transition where we got to see what the world was like pre-internet versus post-internet. So we can kind of, we got the benefit of the best of both worlds. So it's like, it's not weird to us. It's not foreign and alien to us to interact on social media, but it's also not foreign and weird to us to interact face to face either. It's like, we couldn't have hit at a better time, because I'm 34. I'm only a couple years older than you are.
I'm older than both of y'all.
Put together.
I don't know about all that. I'm 37, but yeah. I mean, I do remember that time where, before everything has kind of taken over as far as, the internet and social media, you did have that. If you wanted to hang out with your friends and do something, you actually had to get out and go and do something. Kids today don't want to get out of their house. They're stuck playing video games, and it's just, I've seen the best of both worlds. And, currently the way that the direction that I guess life in general with the generations that are coming up, it's kind of scary, and I look at my daughter who's only, 11 years old and she'll be 12 in May. And it's just, she's glued to her, iPad. And I'm like, you're going to have to get off of that. So it's really concerning to see what happens to that generation as she gets older and what's going to come for them. So it's definitely interesting, but I'm glad to be able to see both sides to this spectrum as far as, the age in which, before technology into where we're at now. So this is definitely interesting.
I think we might find enough disasters from this time, like what happened to Kyler Murray over the weekend, the Oklahoma quarterback. The thing that happened to Kevin Hart because of some old tweets. While there are scalps being taken in the media world, I see a backlash from younger folks that I think maybe they're nervous about what's on their Twitter feeds, that they don't want to be judged by their worst moment. There might be enough backlash coming that gives us all a mulligan, gives us all some forgiveness. I mean, humans need forgiveness like we need air. It's a necessity. And so there could be some amount of just self-preservation where it's, let's give this other person a second chance instead of trying to pounce on them. The other thing I think we have to do is, for whatever reason, I think we have started assigning people value by their political opinions, where I think we used to identify one another as part of their families, or like when I hear someone is from a certain state, I recognize something from where they're from. But now we really are identified by, what do you think about guns and abortion and marriage and taxes? And it's like, hold on, those aren't core to who I am. There's other things that are way more important than those opinions. If we can get back there, I think it'll help with unity.
It's like the 8th deadly sin now is like having bad thoughts. Like, you're not allowed to have them. Like,
well, I don't think it's thoughts. I think it's more or less beliefs. If you believe a certain way, you're automatically judged because of that. And There can't be any kind of dialogue or conversation to be able to hash that out and to understand each other and where we come from. And I think that's the problem, is that there's no patience among people these days to really sit down and conversate about something. And I think that the more patience that we start to show once again towards fellow man, we're able to actually have those kind of conversations. Yeah, it just seems to be something that has been lacking in the social fabric of America today, and the world in general.
Cory, I wonder if you two would agree with this.
No.
I feel like
But Cory, I was going to ask you about the forgiveness thing. I was just sitting there thinking about it. Is one of the things is like there's no room to grow. Like there's no room for like to make those mistakes, you know, to be able to say, okay, well, yeah, I used to believe that, but now I don't. And here's why. And it's like, no, we're still going to hold you accountable for that thought you had 10 years ago that you posted on a live forum.
Yeah, I want everyone, let's give you one on the left. I want everyone on the political left to give the benefit of the doubt like they gave President Obama. Remember, President Obama was an anti-gay marriage candidate in 2008. He was anti-gay marriage until 2012, until he changed his mind. Well, if you're a candidate now and you were anti-gay marriage in 2010 when it was illegal literally everywhere in the country, you're still being judged for that opinion then. And so the same grace the left has given President Obama, let's all just give that to each other on opinions we've even previously held. I know this, man. I've been wrong about a lot. I look back at some of the stuff I was saying at 22, and I was a jerk, and I was wrong, and I handled people poorly. I don't want to be judged for that because I acknowledge it. I was a jerk. I was wrong how I handled those people. What I want for all of us is I don't think we give anyone the benefit of the doubt anymore. I'm friends with a lot of liberals, and I'm not one. But what I assume is when they think differently than I do about taxes, I just think they probably value something differently than I value. But they're not bad people. Right. They don't want control of things like folks on my side will do. Well, they just want control of your life. I don't think they do. I just think they have different values than I do.
Well, I think both sides want to control people's lives. That's what the government is that lever of control. like on the right, you know, you tend to have the people that want control over your right to give birth or your right, you know, women's rights and that kind of thing. On the left, you tend to want to control people's, you know, pocketbooks and the wealthy's money. They want to control that. It's like it's just you know, two sides of the same coin.
I just wonder if they think that about themselves. Like, I agree with you. That's what they're doing. They're trying to use power to control others. But I don't think I know any lefties that say, you know what I want? I want control of other people's lives. I don't think they start there. I think that might be the result, but that's not their heart. And the conservative who says, I think that I think marriage should be one man and one woman. Well, I don't think they hate anybody, but they are trying to use the government to control others. Right. And so just benefit of the doubt to people on their motives would go a long way.
Man, actually listening for 10 seconds too, man, it really helps.
It does.
So you started to ask a second ago, and I cut you off. If we agree about something,
yeah, the question was, do you think that's what we lack? Is we assume we don't give benefit of the doubt. We assume the worst. That when you hold that opinion, the reason you hold it has to be terrible, instead of being curious or assuming the best of that person. So I wondered if you guys also thought that was the problem.
Oh, as a general rule, you never assume malintent when stupidity will work just fine as a reason.
I'm actually kind of running this thing on social media right now. We had a conversation about this before the show tonight, and I wanted to really get on Facebook and kind of mix things up. I'm not going to give away what I'm doing, but I wanted to see the reaction I would get from people on social media, because I've learned that the reaction that you get is just assumption, without facts, without asking questions, and that's what a lot of people do, especially on the internet. So, and we'll cover that.
Give us a little preview of what you're doing. Just
okay, so
because this will be a little while before it goes out.
Okay. So basically, what I'm doing is I had made a post on Facebook talking about relationships. I had pulled a poll, and I asked people, you know, are relationships healthier if you're not posting photos of each other all the time, talking about each other all the time, and this and that? So I posted that. Then several hours later, I decided to change my profile picture to a good friend of mine that I've known since I was 2, me and my friend Marie. And I didn't say anything about the photo. I just made it my profile picture. Now, Marie is married to a great man by the name of Mike, and they've been together for more than 10 years. But to the people that know me and know my life and know the history behind me and Marie would know, oh, hey, this is like his sister, nothing to it. But for the people who don't know me would assume, oh, this is his new girlfriend, this, that, and the other. So I let that run for about a week. And then I was telling Daniel, I said, I'm going to Georgia to visit some family for Christmas. So I uploaded another profile picture with no mention of who it was, to me and my aunt, very beautiful lady. And I'm going to let that run probably until after Christmas. Hadn't said anything, didn't mention who she was, that she's a family member. Both times that I have now uploaded these two separate photos, people had thought this is somebody that I was in a relationship with. Without even asking, they made their own assumption. So I've been running this kind of little, I guess, experiment on Facebook to kind of see, is that the kind of world we live in now on social media? Is that assumption about people without facts, without asking, without actually having a conversation? And that's exactly what it's doing. It's proving that point. And it was just something fun at first, but then I got to thinking to myself, there is actually a pattern here with social media. And it's not just with Facebook, it's with Twitter. It's, it could be with YouTube when you're watching a video and posting a comment. I mean, it's crazy. So I had to see it for myself.
Could be CNN posting a picture of Donald Trump staring out a snowy window to give you cold feelings about
Just don't play the music, baby. It's cold outside and we'll be fine.
No kidding.
So anyway, that was just kind of what I'm doing right now. It's just that little bit of a social experiment that I wanted to try. So when I go down there to visit, we're actually going out next Saturday night. We're going out to dinner and my aunt is wanting to get a tattoo. Now, just a little bit of background on that. She is a hardcore Christian woman. She started up a nonprofit called the Breathe Foundation for special needs, children and adults. And so we're going to go out and we're going to get her a tattoo that says Breathe on her wrist. We're going to do all this stuff. And I told her, I said, I'm going to end up corrupting you the whole time, I'm down here. She goes, no, that's fine. But part of this experiment, what I'm going to end up doing, I don't mean to run or take up most of this time on this subject, but I wanted to, once I get down there and we take these photos, I'm going to upload them to Facebook. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let it run its course and see what happens, for the ones that don't know.
No, I think you're going to be proving your hypothesis is right. People assume they're brilliant. People assume they're all Sherlock Holmes and will have known your life. They will know exactly what's going on in your life because of a Facebook picture. But
here's the thing, though, is what I've learned is people... I've uploaded photos of these family members and my friend Marie. They came up back in October, and we went to Cleveland's Dome up in Smokies, and I just posted all these photos of her and I on Facebook just back in October. Now moving forward to December, and it's been that short of a time frame, people forget. And it's like they just really don't put two and two together. So I don't know if it's just the lack of really paying attention to detail on social media, but it is proving my point that people don't recall. They don't, oh, I like it. I'm going to click on it and say that I like it and then come back later. Oh, you guys are dating. Awesome. No, she's married. I've made this known. We've known each other since we were 2, so it is interesting. But going back to what you were talking about as far as, I think a lot of it is patience. I think society has given us so much at our fingertips that we don't understand or can process to be patient anymore. I really don't. I mean, if you go through, and I kind of give this example before to other people, that if you're in a drive-through at McDonald's, you expect your food by a certain time. Am I not right? And if you're sitting in that line for more than 5-10 minutes, you start to get frustrated. You're just like, what is taking so long? And, why, what's going on? And then all of a sudden you pull up to the window, you're angry. You want to know why it's taking so long? Why, and then, my God, if your food is cold, it's like World War III, and I've seen that. I used to be that person that would get upset in that drive-through line. And once I got to the window, I'm like, what the hell took so long? But then I quickly realized it's just a few minutes. And then I think with age, you start to realize that you need to slow your roll down. You need to be a little bit more patient and understanding, because you don't know in that kitchen if they ran out of something, or if somebody had an accident, or, if it's somebody training another employee. You just don't know. And you're making assumptions, and that's not okay. And so now I've learned to actually have a little bit more discipline when it comes to being able to kind of sit back, relax, and not be so quick to judge, so
two qualities we need more of. When I hire people in my job, I do some of that in what I do,
right,
or in any kind of interview setting. When they ask that question, what are the qualities you most value in the people around you, the qualities you think are important for people? We lack a ton of curiosity and patience.
Oh, yeah.
No one's curious anymore to know anything new. And when you get to a certain age, too, it feels like there's people in my life a little older than me where it does seem like I know what I know, and I'm never going to learn anything new ever again. And they're done thinking. They're finished with all the thinking they're ever going to do. And I think those two things are intertwined. If you're not patient, you can't be curious. And curiosity takes patience to actually learn new things.
So that actually gives me a good segue into one of the questions I was going to ask you. We've been talking about having conversations, and I just wanted to try to put that to the test now and actually show people what it might be like to disagree on something. But I'm going to start off with something a little bit lighter that refers to what you were just talking about. But basically, you mentioned that people should consume antagonistic sources for information and news. I remember one of your episodes, I was listening to you saying that. And what I was wanting to ask you is, if I'm a dyed-in-the-wool religious follower, and my chosen book, whether it's the Bible, Quran, or the Torah, what have you, and I'm convinced that this book already, provides all the answers I need to succeed in my life on this planet, what incentive do I have to expose myself to alternative viewpoints and those antagonistic information sources? Like, why would I risk muddying the waters and inviting confusion into the mix?
Oh, it's a great one. I have to come from a very specific Christian perspective on this one. So
I wouldn't expect anything less. So I was actually curious about what you would say.
Yeah, I also never want to speak for a religion that's not mine, because they would probably look at me and say, "Hey, stop it, man! Don't talk for us."
Right.
And so, for the Christian perspective, I think most Christians need to be consuming the Dawkins book. The God Delusion's fine, but he had a better one. I can't remember the name of it right now. Consuming those Hitchens debates that are available that on YouTube, because we, from the Christian perspective, we believe the mind is a gift. The same way that your health is a gift, don't waste it. Well, your mind's a gift. You need to cultivate it. This is if we believe God created reason and logic, well, we need to be engaged in reason and logic. And so we do believe that the Scripture holds fundamental truth, but it's not the only place that holds fundamental truth. So we believe in special revelation, that the Bible gives us information, but also general revelation, that God gave us a big, broad world to go learn things about, and we should be doing that. So to the Christian who would say, "Hey, man, I got everything I need in the Bible," I would go, yes, you do have everything you need for eternity, for your life, but be more curious. God gave us stuff to go learn, go do it. So at least from the Christian perspective, that's why I would say consume antagonistic people, because your mind is something to cultivate.
Yeah, it was really interesting when I heard you speaking about it, because I was like, well, this is very in line with the same things we talk about here. And in fact, I actually made an entire fake news guide that would help people, through this media cesspool to be able to figure it out. Like, okay, I'm going to watch news sources from different locations, get a bunch of varying viewpoints. These are the things to look out for. These are the things to look for. These are some red flags, so on and so forth. And it's like, okay, I love when I'm talking to somebody and I can tell that they only consume one viewpoint on their news sources. Like, you can tell, because there's like this certain like script they run. Like, you've seen the NPC meme lately. It's like that. It's like, I'm literally talking to an NPC right now. You only have this one perspective. You don't even have any nuanced views on it except for what you're being told. And it's kind of heartbreaking a little bit.
Well,
because
do you think that also could be driven because the media is so biased?
Well, I mean, that's part of it, but I think the responsibility is on the individual to go out and expose themselves to other information.
Yes. Well, I'll give you two examples of this. Anytime back in the day, Ed Schultz, he used to be on MSNBC. He had a radio show, if you recall Ed Schultz. He called people he had a derogatory term that only he used for conservatives. I think it was conservatards. I'm almost positive.
Oh, wow.
And when
it's actually not bad.
Heard someone say it, I knew they were an Ed Schultz person. But when I also hear people on the right say, well, the drive-by media said, well, here's all I know. That's Rush Limbaugh's thing. He came up with the drive-by media.
I forgot about that. Yeah. It's been years since I listened to Rush.
And you are better for it. That it's been years. Every year you don't listen to Rush, you become a better person. Both sides of that, it goes, your news is so one-sided. You've actually learned a new vocabulary that excludes other people that don't agree with you. They literally don't know the words you're using because you're your news sources gave you words that don't even exist.
It's like you're in another tribe 2 rivers away, and you only speak the local dialect.
Yep.
Exactly.
But it's the digital version of that.
Yeah.
It does seem like we're speaking different languages, but we go to our silos and our corners, and we're taught a language, and then we just bring our language back to the marketplace of ideas, and we don't even know how to communicate with one another because of it. And that's why another reason we should engage. I started changing. I think 9. I started listening to NPR, and I started hearing things I had never heard.
Oh God,
and ideas I'd never heard, and went.
Should we hang up on him now?
I'm being challenged, and it felt good.
Should we hang up on him now? He's an NPR guy.
Uh-oh.
I think so.
I'm just kidding. I love it. I love NPR.
NPR is the Paris.
No, I do listen to a lot of NPR as well, especially like the Radio Lab stuff. I love that.
Oh, they're so good.
So good. I've been listening to a lot of stuff. I actually listened to. There's a gentleman probably. As far as just taking the extremes on. Exposing yourself to alternative viewpoints. There's a gentleman, for the lack of a better term, named Tariq Nasheed on Twitter. This guy, when he does his show, every single problem in the world is a result of white supremacy.
Oh, dear Lord.
Everything. Yeah. It's so funny to listen to him talk. And it's just interesting to see the perspective, because it's like you really have to twist your mind into some really complicated acrobatic pretzels to blame everything on, to have one problem for every issue. It's like, so it is fun to do. I know I asked you the question, but I was just saying it's fun to do, to be able to go out and look at other viewpoints, because then it makes you either you learn something new like you did for NPR, or you hear some other viewpoints that strengthen your own, because you're like, wow, that's crazy, and I can now see even more clearly the boundaries and borders of my own beliefs.
But I think it also.
2 more thoughts on that.
Yeah.
One, I think it might be Voltaire. I can't remember who said that the unexamined life is not worth living.
Mm-hmm.
And so your ideas are also not worth having if you've not examined them. So you don't even have a right to your ideas, I don't think, if you have not challenged them some. So be smart and challenge them. And again, come from a Christian perspective. That's actually something we say in Psalm 90. We actually say, number our days or measure our days. And part of that concept is put a measurement up to see if you're using your time wisely. And one of the ways you can use your time wisely is go and learn from other people who don't think like you.
Yeah, I actually wanted to put that to the test. I actually had a question about that, because that was one of the things that stood out to me, which you said, if you can't honestly and with integrity argue your opponent's side of the debate, you really haven't earned the right to have your philosophical position. And I was going to see from your perspective, if I challenge you to, as a Christian, can you make the atheist argument?
Oh, I think so. And if I get it wrong, I want to be corrected.
Right. I was just curious, like, just to be more specific, because I know it's quite a wide-ranging you could go anywhere with this. Maybe just a definition. What would you say? What would you be your best argument for what an atheist actually is?
An atheist is a person who's convinced, who has confidence, more confidence than not, that all things are material, all things are natural. Is that fair?
That's interesting.
I'm not an atheist, so.
Yeah, I know you're not an atheist. Yeah. So I've never heard that particular perspective or viewpoint. It's a good one. I think recently I realized I don't like to put labels on myself, because I like to be open and able. Unframe of Mind is that for a reason. There's a reason that the logo is an open box. It's got a way out. It's always. That being said, I realized I don't have any labels for myself that say what I do believe. My labels that I give to myself are only ones that show what I don't believe. Specifically, atheism just says I don't believe in a God. I mean, it's really that simple. I just don't believe a God exists. Now, if I'm open to possibility of, being convinced otherwise, but I haven't yet so far. And then anarchism I'm an anarchist, and that's because I don't believe in government. That's it. Absolutely. People like to assume. They see those labels and they like to assume what I do believe, and they have no idea at all without having to talk to me first, which I love it that way. I love it that way.
Yeah, that's fun. I like it.
And I think that's one of the reasons why you and I get along, is because we've had those discussions, but I respect your viewpoints enough to know that it doesn't really impact my life. You're still a good human being. You're still a good person. Now, what I would like to know is with being an atheist, and, coming from somebody who is Christian, obviously, would you ever actually go to church?
I've been to church.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
And actually, but your feelings on that just would not change.
Matter of fact, I used to go to a church over, we'll just say down the road. I don't want to give away too many location details, but used to go to church down the road, and I really enjoyed going and talking to the pastor. I enjoyed his sermons because the message was fantastic. I love the messages. You know, I can listen to the message and kind of take what I want and leave. You know, what's the phrase here? Take what you want and pay for it.
Yeah,
basically. But I'll listen to what he says, and I can kind of separate the spiritual, ethereal type stuff from the actual message, the core, philosophy behind it. And I loved it because they knew who I was and what I claimed to believe, and they did not treat me any different. And I absolutely loved it. And we'd go there. We my mother-in-law goes there. We go there for the dinners. We go there for every it's not as often as maybe my wife would like to go, but when we do go, I feel perfectly comfortable going. I don't have any problem with it.
That's good.
So I'm not scared.
My brother-in-law,
I'm not scared of it.
Actually. Long time, like almost his whole life. My brother-in-law, who's now about to be 40, was an atheist up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. He married into a 4th-generation missionary family. I'm literally the only guy in my family's lineage that's not an overseas missionary, and my big brother's a pastor. He married into that family as an atheist, but always felt really comfortable around our people because for any Christian that might be listening, one of the things we're supposed to be known for is we're nice. That's what we're supposed to be to everybody. So learn that, any Christian that might be listening. So that definition of atheism that's the simple one. So you don't object to mine, that it's having more confidence than not that all things are material or natural.
Not necessarily. I'd have to think on a little bit more, but I'm not totally against it. I do believe that everything does have some kind of representation here in objective reality. Like there's got to be a way to explain everything. Maybe we just haven't figured it out yet. I don't know. I mean, it's still just pretty much wide open. I just haven't been convinced that it's all controlled by one central, dictator, if you will.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh, the history of science is explaining the stuff that we previously thought was supernatural. That is true. That's been the history of science. We thought something was unexplainable, and then we went, no, actually, it's a germ. It's just right here. Let me show you the microscope. It's right here. Yeah. And so that has been the history of science. But in any event, as long as that's not an offensive way to say that's what I think atheism is, then I'm okay with it.
Yeah, we're good. Oh my God, we can disagree on something, and I don't feel the overwhelming desire to put my fingers around your throat. That's amazing.
Well, and it's of course something
I feel like I'm growing as a person.
You need to grow. You're only 5'8".
Hey,
short shit. But no, I mean, it's funny because for me, it's a conversation you and I have never had on this show. Mm-hmm. You and I have never talked about religion. I don't know why. Maybe it's because of the topics of conversation.
Never came up,
and I'm fine with that. But I've enjoyed learning the things or your perspective as far as when it comes to being an atheist. It doesn't change my, obviously my beliefs, but it gives me more insight on the thought process of others, have.
Yeah.
And it kind of educates me. Now, I don't go to church nearly as often as I probably should or like I used to. And I think a lot of that has been corrupted because of the way churches have been, for me.
That's a whole other topic. Absolutely.
I'm not going to get into that, but
yeah.
I actually stopped going to church altogether after Pastor David Landreth, who was over, Long Hollow for many, many years. When he passed, he was a preacher that really taught you something. Mm-hmm. And went out of his way to really kind of educate you on the Bible. And when he passed, I just kind of went to, I started church hopping and trying to find a home and it just nothing. I don't know if I've kind of put his legacy on a pedestal and for another preacher to step up and to kind of fill that role. But I just don't think there's pastors out there anymore that had that same kind of passion that he did. And it kind of sucks.
You should go see Cory. I hear he does a fantastic job.
And I was reading over your material and I was listening to your podcast and I thought, well, if Beach wasn't so far from me, because you got to remember I'm all the way in Murfreesboro. But I would love to come one weekend and check it out, and obviously get a chance to meet you as well. But
you are always welcome. So one other quick thought on the atheism thing. Mm-hmm. I have a caller on our local station here because I also I'm the fill-in host on the morning show sometimes, so I'm the backup plan. And there's an atheist who calls literally every day.
Oh wow, dedicated, isn't he?
I'm very grateful that he listens. I mean, this is an atheist guy who turns on a Christian radio station every morning instead of listening to NPR or listen to Joe and Mika on satellite radio on the way in. He listens to us, and I'm grateful for it. His atheism, though, is a different brand. He's mad about everything. He wants to scream about everything, and he can't believe that not everyone can't see that he's an atheist. And I can't, or not that everyone believes in him. He just can't believe not all of us are there. Where most atheists I know are super chill. They don't care that not all of us agree. But there's a brand of atheism that's almost evangelical in its nature.
I know. It's crazy. They're branded. A lot of people brand them the militant atheist, where that's
a good term.
I
think it's a vast minority.
From what I understand, the numbers might be different now, but it was something like 70% of atheists tend to lean to the left. So I'm already in the minority there as it is. Right. And then if you put anarchist on top of that, I'm a rare breed here. And so it's interesting perspective to talk to other atheists and find out, wow, we agree on that, but we disagree on fundamentally everything else for the most part. I mean, it's interesting to have the discussions, and it's like, okay, so if you came to that conclusion, how come you can't see that same conclusion with your government? Like, it's just a different form of God. That's all it is.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with the way folks, especially on the left, tend to think about government. It's a God substitute.
Yeah, absolutely.
It substitutes for the family sometimes, but sometimes for how we think about whatever deity you worship as well. I'm not surprised you sometimes feel outside in your own community, because atheism is really liberal, at least in the West, in the Western world. It is.
See, I have a hard time referring to it as a community. I know a lot of atheists do get together and discuss it, but it's like, how
of a network?
How successful can a community of people that just say, I don't believe something, be really, there's no real binding principle there, it's not really a thing. And I actually tried going to an atheist meetup in Murfreesboro a while back, and it was really weird because there was something that felt very church-like about it. And it was interesting because my kids were playing with the other kids, and somebody looks over to me and she's like, "Oh, look over there, our heathen kids are playing together." I'm like, "Okay,
time to go.
Time to go. I'm not coming back here." This is so weird. I was like, "What is?"
So it sounds like you had a better experience actually going to church versus going to an actual atheist.
Okay, so
meeting.
check this out. Check this out. As far as basic principles and beliefs, and as far as just basic morality, I'll go with the Christian every time. Right. Like, I got mad respect for that. I don't think y'all got it right in terms of, the God part of it. But as far as a good system of morals and a good system for people that maybe don't want to take the time to think harder about things, I'm not trying to say you don't think about it. I don't mean this in an insulting way at all, but I know for a lot, I've always had the view that it was kind of a simple answer for life's complex questions, for people that just want an answer that they can deal with, that takes them down a generally good path that makes sense to them. I think it just, in overall, just the general structure for the majority of the Christian population, it just works. So we'll just go with it.
That question of pragmatics and practicality, the Enlightenment, what it did in the 1700s and what it launched in the Western world over the next 3 centuries is an inarguable objective truth that when faith is the undergirding foundation on which reason starts to operate, what happens is human flourishing. So there's a reason the Western world is the one that liberated women and ended slavery and came up with all of our science and medicines and the internet. We're the ones that did that because it came out of the Enlightenment, off of this foundation of a Christian principle, and then reason started to build on top of what we laid down. This is Adam Smith, when he wrote Wealth of Nations, before he did capitalism, he wrote a book called Moral Sentiments. And when you get your moral sentiment straight and then build the structures of reason on top of it, you get people being happy and fed and rich and wealthy. And that's what the Western world is.
Absolutely. And right now, where the most atheists are failing is the fact that they're saying, okay, well, we don't believe all that, but we're not giving people a path to something different or something better. It's like you kind of end up going from a system of morals into like this complete nihilism. Like I have, okay, so I don't believe in God. Now what? Like, where do I get my principles from? It's like, okay, we got to work together. Maybe that's a reason for a community, but I don't see that happening. And I don't really think it's the atheist's responsibility by any stretch of the imagination, but there's just nothing there to replace it just yet. People haven't figured out the morals in a secular way.
Sam Harris is doing the best work on this. He's the one that's trying to articulate from an atheist perspective the best that you should define your morality by what's been the best for people. And when you look around the world's philosophies, Western Enlightenment thinking has led to the best outcomes for people. So the atheist Sam Harris says, well, that's the one. That's the morality we should follow. But at least he's working on it. He's coming up with something structural.
I'm going to have to disagree with you on terms of who's doing the best, but this might just be a subjective opinion. Because Sam Harris tends to lean a lot more toward, no freedom of choice, no free will. Okay. I don't like that at all. That doesn't jive with me. I think, in my opinion, the best person that's doing this work is Stefan Molyneux through the.
I've not read from him. Okay.
He's got this thing called the universally preferable behavior. All his books are on his website for free. He's also an anarchist and an atheist as well. I jive a lot with his thinking because he actually does think. So it's refreshing, and it's this moral. He breaks it down, calls it universally preferable behavior, and he talks about how. I'm going to do a terrible job of trying to sum it up, but basically, the best way I can describe it is there's a lot of behaviors that are universally preferable, such as theft cannot be universally preferable. Like, I can't want to steal from you and you steal from me at the same time. It just logically doesn't work. So we kind of can set that pretty simply as a universally preferable behavior of, oh, hey, don't steal. You don't like it. I don't like it. We can agree on that. There's a good moral, starting point. He talks about the non-aggression principle a lot as far as, the non-initiation of force. You've heard of that, I'm sure, through libertarian circles and stuff. So he brings that philosophy into this UPB is what it's called. If you do want to check it out, you feel free. You may have been turned away from him because everybody wants to call him an alt-right white supremacist like everybody else nowadays. Seems like, but that's simply not the case. But
I've actually not even heard of him. But going back to a callback to earlier in the episode, I'm curious. That's a thing in me. So I'll definitely look him up. That sounds like an impossible name to spell, Stefan Molyneux. But I'll do my best. Yeah,
I can send you some links, and he's got free books, and this in audio book as well, if that's easier for you. Very interesting stuff. So, let me move on to another question here. We'll start trying to wrap it up. How much time I got with you today?
I got about 10 or 15 more minutes.
Cool. That'll be just fine. So, I was curious if you could go a little more into detail. One of your episodes, you talked about how unimportant this last midterm election was. It was interesting listening to your viewpoints on it. Maybe you can just sum that up a little bit for us, and then we'll take it from there.
Oh man. So I think I do that. The midterm election is unimportant in relation to a bunch of other things. And so here's one of my big themes, that Silicon Valley changes the world, not Washington, D.C. New York City changes the world, not Washington, D.C. The stuff happening in D.C., we're not going to remember it. We're not going to remember any of it in 10 years. But what's happening with cryptocurrency, we talked about off air, what's happening with self-driving, what's happening with autonomous cars, what we're doing with satellites, that's the stuff that matters. And so if you're looking at this midterm election as in this is going to change the world, it's not. You're actually missing everything that's changing the world. It's happening out in Silicon Valley right now. And so that was one way in which I said it doesn't matter as much as you think, because the real stuff that's mattering doesn't happen in DC anyway. But then second, I think it was because I knew what the outcome was headed towards. And so all that really meant was we're not going to do anything. We're just going to be deadlocked for 2 years. Literally nothing's going to happen. There might be some investigations, but we're about to go 2 years and literally nothing will pass. And we're just going to sit around and do nothing.
It's an interesting philosophy. I don't know that that's going to happen. I feel like you're going to see Trump start to move toward dealing with the left in terms of giant infrastructure projects and things like that.
Well, you already are with the wall.
Interesting.
I mean, if you look at what was going on between him and Nancy Pelosi and what was it, the live debate that they had talking about, funding the border wall, and seeing that they're already going after him for that. It's just, It almost seemed like the midterms was kind of like, you're pulling for your favorite football team to do well, and they didn't do well.
That's the comparison you made too.
So for me,
it
kind of seemed like, we were just the cheerleaders cheering on whoever the candidate was that you wanted to see elected. Because I know I was pulling for Ted Cruz in Texas, and I don't even live in Texas, So it felt like very cheerleader-ish at a sporting event when it came to the last midterms. And I think a lot of that, too, has something to do with, you're going to go with, obviously, if you're a Trump supporter, people who are Republican. Now, the left has done a fantastic job of really shooting themselves in the foot here lately. And then seeing our woman, Alexandria Cortez. Yes, thank you.
He never remembers it.
I don't. And it's probably a good thing that I don't. But I just want to know. It's at some point, I really hope that she is just messing with us. She doesn't know the three branches of government. And it's not just that. I mean, it's just some of the comments, the socialism and the globalism. And I'm thinking, have you seen what's going on in France right now? It's scary. Mm-hmm. It is really scary. So to see those, individuals in power now, that scares the living crap out of me. That's why I do feel like the midterms, to some extent, were important. Because when you have women such as her that were elected, you have now opened up that door.
Are you saying you disagree with Cory on?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I do on one hand think that this was a big cheerleader event, but then on the other hand, if we start thinking that way, that they're not important, this is what happens. You get people like, Alexandria Cortez into office. Mm-hmm. So then it starts out with one, and then, you could find yourself slowly growing this. And then all of a sudden we're looking around like, how did we become a socialist country? We're not, we're capitalist. And that's kind of what I feel like happened with France. I mean, if you see that the destruction that's going on over there because of their political, situation, globalism is a little bit different, not too much.
Let me throw in yet another perspective here. I'm going to take the leftist perspective on this because if I'm somebody on the left, I tend to be probably one that's going to be more apt to take free government goodies and free help, of sorts. And I'm looking at this midterm election and going, okay, my freebies here are potentially super under attack right now. And if a certain amount of conservatives get into power, they're very interested in cutting back the welfare state. They probably will never do it. Realistically, they would never do it. But that is a very real fear that does play a part into why I, as a lefty, would kind of go out and want to make sure my vote is heard and make sure that I'm spreading the word of saying, hey, it may not be quite as overtly, stated as that, but that is a very real possibility for me.
Well, and going back to, to what Cory was saying, that, this is going to be a gridlock for 2 years. I do agree with you on that. I guess where I'm coming from is that this has now created an opportunity or a door to be open for future candidates on down the line to believe in this progressive ideology of socialism, and that really scares me. Right. It really does.
Your argument there is, to use a sports analogy, they're building the farm system, the minor leagues of progressive politicians.
Right.
This midterm allowed them to start bringing in new faces that can run later.
Dude, that needs to be a t-shirt. That needs to be a t-shirt on your show.
Yeah, I mean, if you go that direction with it, yes, that's absolutely correct. I think now that we're kind of moving into this wave, now you have to understand she is younger. She has that generation back in her. And you're starting to see the forefront of that generation finally come into the picture. And the influx of it, I think, is only going to get worse. I really do. Not saying that it's a bad thing. I just,
I also think I probably made that point because sometimes I get quite sentimental. And my idea for people is you care about DC too much. Right. So if you think this election matters a ton, well, don't forget about your family and your neighborhood and doing good things.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess in the way of politics, it probably does matter. But I always try to get people focused on other things, that DC is not nearly as important as you think it is in your life.
Right.
Yeah. I agree 100% with that particular view on that, because I think that's something that more of us can do is focus on, okay, we can focus on these elections, but realistically, I mean, even your vote arguably doesn't count. What realistically are you going to be able to do about it? I think that would be a good way to strengthen your argument is the old adage about focus, give me the wisdom to focus on what the hell I can control.
Yeah.
Well,
or I don't remember how it goes exactly, but I'm sure you could probably.
I guess to kind of give you an idea. Is the charitable work that I've done. We've done major disaster charitable work when it came to Harvey and of course Gatlinburg back when they had the wildfires. Now we also do things locally. So I think that when you compare that to, and I'm just using this as an analogy, but if you're comparing this to politics, you can still care about what happens in DC, but you need to remember to bring that back to where it happens here at home. And that was something I've always told the folks that I've worked with. You can help abroad, but you need to also continuously helping the people back home where you're from.
And even your own self-health as well.
Right. So I think that, yes, you should worry about DC, or you shouldn't, but to an extent, and then you need to focus on your general area. So
good. Yeah,
so
agreed.
Take that a bit further. You had, as part of that commentary, you kind of briefly mentioned the idea of decentralizing power, and that would kind of help solve the problem. I was kind of bummed out that you didn't go into more details, so I wanted to take the opportunity now to get some idea what you meant by that, because I love the idea of it. I just want to know what you thought, what your idea of that, what that meant to you.
So, it starts here. I think it's originally in Federalist 17 where this idea comes from. But here's my idea. That the people in Fargo, North Dakota, and the people in San Francisco, California are so different, they shouldn't have the same rules. That the people in Nashville, Tennessee, and the people in Montpelier, Vermont are so different. That having all the same rules is absurd. Having the same minimum wage is absurd. Having the same gun laws is absurd because the people are all too different. And so when people get this diverse and different, the way to bring peace is that we're not fighting over the power to impose our will on others. And so we start to decentralize power to where your mayor matters a lot. Your mayor matters more than your president. That your governor then matters more than your president. That your state capital in Nashville or where I am in South Carolina in Columbia matters more than what's happening in DC. And this is totally an idea on peace. Well, how do I get people to stop hating each other? Well, let me try to minimize how much they fear each other. Because we fear each other because we think, well, if you guys get power, you're going to make me do stuff I don't want to do.
Exactly.
Well, then let's not do that. Let's decentralize power so we can all stop being terrified of each other.
I actually like that a lot.
That makes a lot of sense. I 100% agree with you. And matter of fact, that's kind of where the anarchist perspective comes into this, is the fact that I would just assume decentralize all the way down to the individual. I mean, why if we already kind of know that the big picture federal government is not working and it's putting people against each other all the time, and it's like this incredibly huge arm of power that people are hungry to grab, then yeah, we could move it down to state level. We could move it down to city level, like you said, with the mayor. But why stop there? Why not move it down to the board of your what's that, homeowners association? Why not just go down to the individual? Because that's ultimately the greatest minority, is the individual. And if we can do that, and if we can really have a system of laws, if you will, that focuses on the individual and individual responsibility, then I think we'll see all of these things go away. Like, people can finally start worrying about their own shit and stop worrying about, because like you said, I shouldn't have to worry about the Florida voting laws. Like, that blows my mind that I should have to be well versed, or feel like I have to be well versed on Florida election, laws and specifics. There's no reason for that at all. It should not have any bearing over my life. It shouldn't affect my kids' life. It shouldn't affect my neighbors. Nothing. There should be zero. It should be something that I read in a paper that go, oh, that's interesting that they do that like that over there.
Exactly.
It almost seems like another country in a way.
It should. It should. Yeah.
And if the more we'll do that, I believe we can actually become a more tranquil people if we can find a way to decentralize that power locally. And philosophically, I think somewhere deep I am an anarchist, but then there's some kind of practical, pragmatic thing that comes out and says, I don't know if that'll work. So I'm somewhere in between. I know that this system isn't sustainable because it's too much power in one place, and people try to wield it against each other.
Do you think that people, I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you think people depend on government way too much than they should?
Yes.
Do they?
Yeah, there's too much government dependency on even their own meaning. In 2012 in Charlotte, when the Democrat National Convention met, they played a video there where one of the people was being quoted, and they said, government is the only thing that we all belong to. That should creep us all out.
Wow.
The idea that government's the only thing we all belong. I don't belong to the government.
No. Well, in a way you kind of do, but yeah.
I would say, for me, what's the only thing me and my Christian brothers and sisters all belong to? Well, we belong to the worldwide church. That's a religious language. And it got used that way at the Democratic National Convention. I think on the right it happens too. And so, yes, they care about government too much in every way. It almost becomes the new church for people.
Well said.
Yeah.
Oh, well, at any rate, one more topic, and then we'll wrap it up.
Great.
Still got a couple more minutes. Cool. Guess what? I'm taking them anyway. Anyway, I'm not sure if you saw it yet, but there was a video I made last year, and I reposted it this year about the pagan traditions over Christmas, as far as the blending and the melding of those two. And I was curious. I'll probably have this edited out by Christmas, but I was just curious how you celebrate Christmas and how you can come to terms with the fact that most of the Christmas traditions that you may or may not practice are rooted in paganism.
Yeah, they're all rooted in paganism. The tree, the decorating of the tree.
Everything.
Literally all the stuff that we do at Christmas, except for maybe the nativity scene,
right.
There are even those that argue that the nativity scene, a virgin birth, is actually from old pagan myths too. And so here's what I say to the Christian: everyone's got your own conscience. If it offends your conscience to take part in a Christmas tree or something like that, then don't do it. If it offends your conscience to take part in a Santa Claus myth, then don't do it. But don't look down on anyone who does. Live at peace with everybody. For my purposes, there's been enough Christianization of the paganism that I don't have a Christmas tree in my house, but that's because I'm single and I don't want one. But if I had kids and I was married and she wanted to put a tree up, that's fine, because we've put some other Christian meaning to it. So we say that the evergreen is because of the never-ending love of God. That's what we think the tree is for. And the candy cane is really about how your sins are cleansed away. And the red is for the blood of Jesus. Like, none of that's what it means, but we've superimposed it. And so for the Christian who wants to practice all those symbols, fine. That's fine with me.
So I got to ask, real tree or fake tree?
I would definitely go real tree because I like the way they smell. I love that smell when I walk into my parents' house and get that evergreen smell.
I'm the same way. I love real tree.
I guess we'll wrap up the show on the visual of Cory sniffing a tree in his house alone because he's single.
Gentlemen, it was a pleasure, man.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a fun talk, and we'll have to do it again. Maybe we can come on your show sometime if you'll have us.
I look forward to it. We'll get it set up.
Cory, it was a pleasure.
It's a date. All right, man.
I'll see you guys.